This is a prospecting segmentation matrix I've built to help you understand how you can segment your purchase data. So how you can interpret this matrix is as follows. In each column, there's a different mechanism by which you can segment your data. So for example, you can segment your purchase data by value. So at the top level, the default, you can simply build a lookalike based off of all of your purchasers. But beneath that, you might decide, I want to build a lookalike based on the top 50% most valuable purchasers in my audience. And then you end up with a unique lookalike, which is different from all purchaser lookalikes. This one is looking for people who look like your highest value customers. And you can take that even a step further. And when you have enough data, you can build a purchase-based lookalike based on the top 25% of your customers by value. Another way to look at it, another way to segment is we know repeat customers are extremely valuable to e-commerce businesses. In fact, we have a whole section dedicated to it later in this course, but you can choose to exclusively look at your repeat purchasers and build a lookalike off of them. So you're instructing Facebook to find users who are similar to not just all your purchasers, but your repeat purchasers, those who are most valuable to your business. Now, another way to segment your purchase data is by recency. So what do I mean by recency? The default is all purchasers, but one step further would be segmenting based on your most recent 50% of purchases. And why would you want to do this? Well, the reality is that demographics change, audiences change over time. And if you're instructing Facebook to look at your most recent pictures, it can have a positive impact on the output in the lookalike audience. If you're working off seed audience, which is 10 years old or 5 years old, those people have changed significantly, the people in that seed audience. So it's important to be mindful that your seed audience doesn't get stale. You could take this a step further and target your most recent 25% of your purchasers. And you'll notice that I've put down figures here, minimum 750, minimum 750, minimum 500, so on and so forth. And what these are, this is my guidance for how many users you should aim to have as a minimum within this group for you to be able to properly leverage it. So how do you know you're ready to use top 50% of purchases as a lookalike once you have 750 unique people in the top 50%? Now that's general guidance and it's not a hard and fast rule, but I did want to assign numbers there so you can have some sense of, am I getting close to being able to use this data in this way? So we've looked at value, we've looked at recency. Another way to segment your data is by category. So a creative way I've seen this used in the past is building a lookalike based off of purchasers of your best selling products, your best selling categories. That will produce a unique lookalike, especially if you decide to pair that targeting with specific creative that is addressing the best selling products. Then that can be a powerful combination. You may also choose to divide by category. So if you're an apparel store, for example, you may choose to segment your purchasers by footwear and use just footwear purchasers as your seed audience. Another way to segment could be by demographic. And unless there is some fundamentally different offering between what you're offering to men versus what you're offering to women, then this might not necessarily make sense for you. But if you are offering fundamentally different products, then it could be worth for you experimenting in, will it generate a unique and valuable lookalike if I use just my men as my seed audience and then I target just men with it, versus if I do just women as my seed audience and I target just women. And another way you could segment by demographic could be by age. So maybe the younger folks who are buying your product are fundamentally different people from the older folks, so you might want to segment your data that way. And then the last column is pretty standard, but it does fall into this whole category, I believe, which is expanding your lookalike percentage. So 1% lookalike is table stakes, but eventually you need to expand to 2%, 3%, etc. Essentially, once you start to hit diminishing returns is the time to expand into those higher percentages. And ultimately, you want to be able to work your way towards 5% and even 10% lookalikes, because it means you're scaling, it means your campaigns are extremely well optimized, and it means there's significant upward scale potential for you. So you might be realizing, hey, this requires a lot of historical data. And if you don't have it yet, or you're working with a new client or a new business, that's okay, because I think this is important to have in your back pocket for when you get to that stage. But there's also ways in which you can apply these principles earlier on in the conversion funnel. So for example, when we're looking at recency, let's say you don't have 750 recent purchases, perhaps you have 750 recent initiate checkouts. So there's sort of alternate ways you can apply this. And when we get to the campaign structures in a minute, we're going to look at a more intermediate structure as well as two advanced structures. So why would you want to segment your data in this way? I think it's a valid question, and this illustration might help display the point. If you are just running a purchase-based lookalike, well, it's one potential audience, right? The size is fixed. It's 1% of the countries you're targeting. Versus if you take that same data and you decide to build with it a 1% lookalike based on the top 50% of purchasers and a 1% lookalike based on another criteria such as repeat purchasers. Well, without a doubt, there will be overlap. And in fact, it may be quite a bit of overlap, even more than I've illustrated here. There will be overlap, but there will also be incremental new people, unique people in each audience. So this is key. Overall, there will be a greater potential audience size, and yet you haven't sacrificed your targeting efficacy whatsoever. If anything, it's become even more refined. Now, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk about interest targeting, because we've been talking so much about lookalikes, but naturally there is strategic purpose for interest targeting as well. And they can be very powerful interest audiences, but the pitfall that I see most often that I want to call out is disproportionate sizing versus your other tactics. So when you're running interest audiences, what you want to be careful of is you want to make sure you don't have a massive, overwhelmingly big interest audience up against your lookalike audiences, because all of your ad spend will simply go here if you're running CBO. So what I like to do, what I like to advise, is to make sure your interest audience size is tethered to your lookalike sizing. So what I mean by this is you want to always make sure your interest audience sizing is matching or under the size of your lookalike audiences. And just be conscious of it so that you make sure you're not accidentally producing this scenario here. But if you are actively using 2%, 3% lookalikes, 1% lookalikes, then yes, you can certainly apply interest audiences that are equal to or roughly equal to those in size. So that's sort of a good way to think about how do you size your audiences when it comes to interests.